And that's what therapists do, coaches do, consultants do, all across the world. It's one of the things that makes me hopeful about humanity, that we have this class of people that are dialed in, not just to spirituality, like the old priests and shamans and stuff, which is pretty great, but also to science, and also to modern social research, and also to vast networks of help and resources that are just over the top, incredible. And that's the impulse that we all have for self-transcendence, that all humans have to some extent, being guided by more expert hands in this age. And that's why it's a great time to be alive.
Indeed. Well, so staying just one more further inquiry with trauma. How prevalent is trauma, and how do you feel about the contrarian insight that emerged in the Rebel Wisdom conversation I've had with Alexander Boehner, where he made the observation that with postmodernity doing away with religion, the function that evil used to have in the storytelling and meaning making of religion, where that became the device we used for excuse, for explanation, for alibi, we now embraced trauma as the new device and use it to explain all our struggles and the way we are. What's your comment about that observation and how prevalent trauma is?
Well, let's just start with prevalence. It's ubiquitous. Not only is it ubiquitous, it's necessary. We do not grow well unless our ideals met and transcended. And we're not going to meet and transcend all our ideals. Some of them are going to leave us sensitized. No human being meets every ordeal and transcends it. You know, from the mindset research by Carol Dweck, if you're not failing at something, or the mastery research in the Talent Code by, I forget who wrote it, the guy who studied mastery, you have to go to the place where you're making a mistake. You know, that's the sweet spot. You're functioning, but you're occasionally making a mistake, and then that's how you grow. Well, the average person in one study by 30 had 4 traumas that could be characterized as major traumas by the DSM diagnostic man. That's the average person, okay? And that's not to mention all what Francine Shapiro calls the little t traumas. You know, humiliations, you know, a critical parent, some bad fit between your psychology and the people around you, the cultures around you, all those kinds of things. So the answer is it's ubiquitous. It's a necessary part of development. Dealing with it is a necessary part of development. Now, yes, because there's somewhat of an ascendance of postmodernism in the world, postmodernists are often called the sensitive self, okay? And when we start talking about what's called the iGen generation, the kids that were born 95 to 2010, there's an awful lot of that. And there's some good news and bad news about that. I think it's a mistake to look at the pathologies of people being overly sensitized and being taught that there's an external control rather than an internal locus of evaluation, that somehow the world is responsible to not trigger me, okay? That's horrible training. You know, the whole thing about trigger warnings, the whole thing about safe spaces, that's not good for people. No offense to everybody who's doing it. It's very much like the Marilyn Grossball did a whole bunch of self-esteem stuff in California in the late 70s about telling kids they were all great because they wanted to give them high self-esteem. And what that did is it just turned a lot of kids into fixed mindset kids who felt like if somebody wasn't praising me all the time, then something was wrong, okay? So that is a pathology. But that pathology isn't driven by trauma. It's actually driven by the opposite. It's driven by people not addressing their sensitization and taking responsibility to turn it into resilience. The kids that work with me, or the adults too, for that matter, if you're sensitized in some area, great. Let's go work the steps. Let's 1, 2, 3, 4. And after a while, you don't feel weak anymore. You don't feel like, oh God, somebody's going to trigger me. You feel strong.
Along with our website at portalsofperception.org, Portals is also available on YouTube and on all podcast platforms, as well as social media. You can become an active member and join the conversation in community events. And you can help us get the word out by liking this content and by sharing it with your friends.